would go into the items, everything it costs to get that land for whatever we planned on using it for in the first place. Then buildings. Buildings, we'd be looking at either we're purchasing it or we're building it from scratch. So we have legal fees again, appraisal fees, but if we're building it from scratch, we'd also be looking at the architecture fees. So everything again to get it up and running. And then equipment, you're looking at purchase or construction. Now you got sales tax, construction of that, transportation costs, installation costs. So again, everything that we looked at in those three things is to get it up and running. So we have a basket purchase. Now we kind of already talked about this in the prior chapter. So a basket purchase is when we buy something and we pay less than what the value is. So in this example, we purchased land and a building for $400 cash, but they appraised more than that. They appraised at $325 and $175. So if you total that up, that's $500. Right? How do we account for this in our books? Well, we know that we got to do some type of journal entry that is going to be, I gotta move this closer to me, that is going to be building, land, and cash. And I don't think I left myself enough room to put it, but cash is going to be, yep, you can't see that. I'm going to move this over a little bit. So we know that the journal entry is going to be something along, we got building, land, and cash. We know the cash has to equal $400,000 because that's what we paid. How do we figure out what to put for building and land? Does anybody know? Does anybody remember doing this in a prior chapter or what we did? Because we did something almost like it. And we have silence. Do we remember doing something that looked like this? 325 over 500, 175 over 500. We took the original cost of each item over the cost of that item. And we found out that the building was 65% of the purchase of the cost, and the land was 35%. So then we took the price we paid and we multiplied it by 35%, and we multiplied it by 65%. And when we did this, I'm cheating, we got $140,000 and $260,000. So we took the allocation of what the original values were, what they were appraised at based on the total amount. The building was $325,000 of the $500 was 65% of the original value, and the land was $35,000. So we took that based on the amount we paid, and that's how we allocate those amounts out. Now that was my chicken scratch, so let me show you on the next slide. It shows you a little bit neater. We did something almost identical to this in chapter 7. Right? We did it when we did the Sirius XM, where we had the purchase of the radio with the service for the year, and we had to allocate out how much of the radio of the cost went to the radio and how much of the cost went to the Sirius XM. So that's called a basket purchase. This is bundled items, yep. And here it's buying 2 items at once. They're calling it basket purchase, but very similar thing. And then here, just talking about how IFRS will do things differently in the future. IFRS doesn't depreciate a plane as a whole, where we're getting ready to talk about the 3 different depreciation methods. We're going to depreciate this plane right now as one whole plane. But IFRS looks at it like, well, that doesn't really make sense, because if you think about it, if we're going to depreciate this plane over 25 years, really the inside of the plane, the seats are worn out much quicker. That would be like 5 years. This part of the plane is 18 years. This part of the plane is 25. Why would you depreciate it over the same amount? IFRS was going to do it based on components. So IFRS looks at depreciation a little bit differently. And to me, actually, it makes a lot more sense. All right, so we're just going to look at now just how we would look at the journal entry if we bought. Cedar Fair is an amusement park. They own Cedar Point and a couple other amusement parks. So they purchased a new ride for $26 million. They got a discount of $1 million. They paid $125 for transportation and $625 for the ride, to install the ride. What is the journal entry going to look like? So the first thing you want to ask yourself, how much does the ride cost? What are we going to record? How much? I'm going to call it equipment. 20. Oh, I just showed you without wanting to. Hang on. There we go. 27 million.
So it was 27 after, I'm sorry, 26 or 25 after the discount?
25 after the discount, yes. So if we say, my pen will not work for me. I keep showing you guys the answer instead. All right, so if we say the equipment, we got 25 after the discount. Is that the price that we're going to put?
That's it.
That's it?
So then we have to add in transportation and installation.
We do, yes. So it's going to be 25. That's going to be the price of the roller coaster. Because remember, we have to include everything it costs to get the ride up and running. Could we get the ride going if it wasn't delivered to us? No. Could we get the ride up and running if we didn't have it installed? No. So we take the 26 million, subtract the discount, add the installation and the transportation. Now, they said they paid a note for the roller coaster, and they paid cash. Whoops, I didn't do that right. They paid cash for the rest. So that's how the bottom part would look like. So equipment for $25,750,000, notes payable for $25 million, and cash for $750 million. Do you see how everything's added in? Okay. So then the next slide just kind of shows you how we'd put that all in to the price again. And then the next slide is going to just show you a diagram of what we talked about. So maintenance costs are typically going to be ordinary, relatively small expenditures that do not increase productivity and do not extend the life beyond the estimate. So those type of things are going to be expenses. Extraordinary repairs, replacements, and additions, those are going to be large, infrequent, major overhauls of replacement. They might extend the life and they might increase productivity. Those are going to be capitalized. So if you think about a car, if you put a new engine in a car, you're going to capitalize that cost. If you put new tires on it, you get an oil change, you do something, windshield wipers, those are all expense. Those are all normal maintenance. Even tires, because while they might extend the life of the car, it's a maintenance item that we all know you're going to do somewhere between 50 and 80,000 miles, depending on what kind of tires you put on your car. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about depreciation. We have talked about depreciation before. I'm grabbing my other note. We have talked about depreciation before, but we're just going to go kind of through as a quick review and notice that, depreciation expense goes on the income statement, accumulated depreciation goes on the balance sheet, same as that we've been doing before. And then a quick review of the journal entry shows us what we need. In order to calculate depreciation, we are going to have to need three things. We need to know the cost of the item, how long we think the item is going to live for. Are we going to keep that item for 3 to 5 years? Is it 25 years? And then what is the residual value? All right, the residual value is something like how long, what is it going to be worth at the end of its life? Here's our depreciation expense. And there's our accumulated depreciation. Now, what new item we have is something called book value. Book value is that value that we believe the item is worth after we take the property, plant, and equipment amount, whatever that is, and we subtract out accumulated depreciation. So in this case, the book value of the equipment is $1,500. All right, in this case, it's $1.5 million. So you probably heard this term before because the Kelley Blue Book is the value that you might think when you go to see how much your car is worth. It takes what the car is, what year you have, how many miles you have, the different things that you have on your car, and different items, and it's going to tell you what it's worth based on what you paid for it, because they know that based on what you said, and then the depreciation of the value of your car giving you the book value. So that is something you're definitely going to want to remember. That's going to be the equipment cost minus accumulated depreciation is going to give you book value. All right, so let's go ahead and get out your working papers and let's take a look at a problem. We are going to look at the first problems that are on chapter 9, M9-2, and then M9-3. And see how we did. So the first one, we're talking about they purchased some land to operate a golf course. So the first one is the purchase of the golf course in Orange County. Are we going to capitalize that or expense it? Capitalize, yep, because we can't golf if we don't have the golf course. So we're going to capitalize it. Guess I need to, there we go, capitalize. All right, now we paid a landscaping company to clear 100 acres on which we're going to build the new course. What are we going to do with that?
I said capitalize.
Yep, we're going to capitalize it because we can't golf unless they clear it for the course. Now we paid a landscaping company to apply fertilizer to the fairways on its Coyote Hills golf course. What do we think? Expense. Yep, that is going to be something that happens every year or more than once a year. Hired a maintenance company to build a 2,000 square foot addition to the clubhouse. Capitalize. Yep, it's a major addition. Hired a maintenance company to replace the locks on the clubhouse and the shed. Expense, yep. And then paid an advertising company to create a campaign to build goodwill.
So this one confused me a little bit.
Okay.
I put expense, but then looking at what you had up here in the PowerPoint, it was saying like if it can increase productivity and things like that, then it's capitalized. And I mean, if you're advertising to build goodwill, then obviously that's going to like increase.
But I think you had it right the first time though, because advertising is always going to be an expense.
A small expense.
Yep, a small
Right,
expense.
okay.
Yep.
So I'm taking too deep, but I did have.
You had expense first. Your first thought was correct. Yep. All right, so let's go ahead and then move down to the next one. All right, so this time they put some dollar amounts with it. We purchased a machine for $70,000 and gave a long-term note. So we're going to capitalize or expense that. What did we get? We capitalized. Yeah, we bought a machine. Doesn't matter how we paid for it. We bought a machine. All right. Now we paid $600 for ordinary repairs. expense. They gave you a keyword there. Now we purchased a patent for $45,000 cash. They slipped, capitalize, yep, they slipped an intangible in there, but it doesn't matter, you're still going to capitalize it. We paid cash, $200,000 for an addition to an old building. Capitalized. We paid $20,000 for monthly salaries. Expense, nothing different than we've already done. We paid $250 for routine maintenance. Expense. And then we paid $16,000 for extraordinary repairs. That's going to be capitalized. Yep. All right. Sometimes they give you a hint with words like extraordinary, ordinary, routine. Sometimes they don't. So, but when they definitely give you those key words, then that's what they're talking about. So, you know, you have repairs because a tornado comes through and you're not in an area that gets tornadoes on a regular basis. That's going to be an extraordinary repair. All right, let's go back to the PowerPoint. And I just lost you guys. That we are going to use. Straight line, double declining, and units of production. So the first thing I'm going to show you is what the formulas are for each one of them. And then we're going to go through a small example. All right, so straight line is the easiest. I'm going to go backwards. Straight line is the easiest. All right, straight line is going to be cost minus residual value divided by what we call the useful life. Now, if you remember, one of the three things I told you a couple slides ago is you need three things in order to calculate depreciation: cost, residual value, and useful life. Cost is what you spent for it. Residual value is what you think it's going to be worth at the end of its life. And useful life is how many years you think it's going to be around. Okay. Units of production, I'm going to go ahead and write down here. Units of production, the book defines it as cost minus residual value times number of units per year divided by total units. All right? And then you have to do that for each year. All right? So if you have 3 or 4 years, you do that each year. There is another formula you can use. All right? The formula that I use is cost minus residual value divided by total units. That gets you something called the depreciable rate, which they actually mention in your book. And then you multiply that times the number of units per year. So once you get this rate, you only have to multiply it times the number of units per year. You don't have to keep doing the whole formula. I'll show you when we work it out how you can do it. Doesn't matter to me which formula you use. I just find the second one easier, so I like to show it to you guys. You can decide which one you want to use. And then declining balance is cost minus accumulated depreciation times 2 over the life. Now notice, that is the only formula out of the three that does not use residual value. All right. There are three things we can get when we use these formulas. The first thing that we calculate with any of them is depreciation expense. That's what we get. So when we do these formulas, we are calculating depreciation expense. if we add up each year's depreciation expense to the prior years, we're going to get accumulated depreciation. And we can also get book value. So when we work these problems, I'm going to show you how we can get that.
On number 3, what is what is the AD?
AD is accumulated depreciation.
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry, can you say again where with E1 you said depreciation expense?
And then we can get then we can also get accumulated depreciation, and we can get book value. And I will show you how we can calculate all three of those. Okay, so do we have the formulas? All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to use these three formulas to calculate Cedar Fair. They give us a very simple go-kart that we're going to depreciate. And so I'm going to go to a white screen. I'm going to still give you the information that's on this screen. Go to the white screen, and we're going to do the depreciation using these three methods. All right, so what we're given is a cost of $62,500, a residual value of $2,500, and a life of 3. All right. It also told us that they expected it to go a total of 100,000 miles. All right. They didn't put this on the screen, but I'll tell you, 30,000 the first year, 50,000 the second year, and 20,000 third year. So the first thing we're going to do is straight line. Straight line says that we take 62.5 minus 25 divided by 3. All right. 62.5 minus residual value divided by the life. That is going to give us 60,000 divided by 3. Depreciation expense is going to be 20,000. And I'll just write expense here so you guys know which one we're dealing with. Now, accumulated depreciation is what depreciation is added on to the prior year. Well, we haven't had any depreciation yet, so year 1 is always going to be equal to just the depreciation expense. 0 plus 20,000 is 20. And then book value, remember, is cost minus accumulated depreciation. Our cost is 62.5. So 62.5 minus 20,000 is 42.5. That's year 1. Now, the reason that straight line is the easiest one, and it's also the most commonly used, is because of this. Once you calculate the first year, every year is exactly the same. So year 1 is 20, year 2 is 20, and year 3 is 20. So once you calculate the first year, you're done for depreciation expense. Now you have to calculate accumulated depreciation and book value. So to calculate accumulated depreciation, you take year 1 and you add it to year 2, and you get 40,000. You take book value, cost, minus accumulated depreciation to get book value, and you get 22.5. And then here you take accumulated depreciation plus depreciation expense, and you get 60. Cost minus accumulated depreciation gives you 2,500. Does anybody see what that 2,500 is?
The ARC fee.
Exactly. This number right here needs to equal residual value. That's how you know you did it right. Because the ending value has to equal the residual value. Make sure you can still read that, 2,500. All right. Any questions on straight line? How to calculate accumulated depreciation or book value? Because we're going to do those exact same steps now for units of production. All right, so units of production using the book formula says that you take 62.5 minus 2,500 times 30,000 over 100,000. So I'd get my calculator out and I would take 60,000 times 30 over 100, which I know is 18,000.
Quick question.
Yep.
So I know you said we have to do that for every year.
Yep.
If we did the second way that you showed, we have to do just that one
Yeah.
way?
So yeah, if you did it the other way I was showing, you would take 62.5 minus 2,500 divided by 100, which actually gives you 0.6. Then you would take 0.6 times 30, 0.6 times 50, and 0.6 times 20. Because that's the numbers up there. So you would get 18, you would get 30, and you would get 12. You get the exact same numbers, but for example, I was having to get my calculator out to do it the other way, because I was going to try to do that one first before I did this one. But by just doing it this way, I can do the math, taking 0.6 times 50 and 0.6 times 20. But I wasn't going to necessarily do the math in my head, taking the 60,000 times, well, I actually probably could have, after I looked at it, times 50 over 100, and then 60,000 times 20 over 100. So it really just depends. But yes, you would have taken this exact same thing here, if you do it this way, and 62.5 minus 2,500, or 60, times 50 over 100. And then one more time. But once you get here, and once you get this number, the 0.6, then you just multiply it times the number of miles used that year. So either or, whichever one makes the most sense. Like I said, the first one is the one that's in your book. The second one is the one that was in a prior book, and it was the one that I learned. So it just depends which one you want to use. Regardless, you will get 18,000, 30,000, and 12,000. And then you have to go ahead and do your accumulated depreciation and book value. Add them together. You get 48. Oh, my battery is going. Why is my battery going down? 48,000. There we go. And then add that here. And I think we're going to end up 14,500. This gives us 60. And again, we are at residual value. And you can know real quickly, if you're not at residual value, then you probably made a mistake. Oops. Does that one make sense? Kinda? Okay. All right, last one. What was that?
No, we just kind of got to put our hands on it.
Yes, exactly. Yep, exactly. All right, so double declining. This one's usually the hardest. So we got 62.5 minus accumulated depreciation. Now, what did I say accumulated depreciation was at the beginning of year one? What was it before we added the 18 and before we added the 20? It was 0. Because we haven't depreciated anything yet. That is one of the most common mistakes on... My writing's not showing up again?
Yeah, the last thing I see where you wrote is DB. Anything after that, I don't see it.
Okay. Let me... But you can hear me. Let me see.
Yeah.
But nothing showing up. Okay. I'm kind of scared to go out of this thing because I don't know what that's going to do. Let's see. Let me see if I can. It says I'm still sharing it and you guys can see it. That's kind of weird. I think someone, hey Jack, can you mute your microphone?
Is anybody else able?
Can anybody else see me writing? All I have is DB 62.5 minus 0. But you know what? Yeah. But you know what? My whiteboard's not showing up. Let me try that. It's not sharing it. Hang on. It is not sharing the right screen. Somehow it isn't. I think, how about now? Still not seeing anything? I don't know why it's not. It says I'm sharing it, but you can't see it.
Oh wait, now it's on presentation.
Okay,
Now
but
it's on whiteboard.
you don't see anything on
65.
times 2 over 3?
62, 5 minus 0. Yep.
Okay, now you can see it. Perfect. Okay. All right, so let me explain what I wrote. So 62.5 minus 0. The 0 is always the first year because you haven't depreciated anything yet, so your accumulated depreciation is 0. And then it's 2 over the useful life, which in this case is 3. All right, because they told us that. So this one always takes a little bit more math. So you're going to take 62.5 times 2 divided by 3. And the first year's depreciation, I think I just lost you guys again. Hang on. Yep. Hang on. It lost you. If you can hear me, hang on. I saw it go blank. All right. All right. If you can hear me, I'm back. Okay, can you see it again?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the first year is 62.5 minus 0 times 2 over 3, which is going to give you 41,667, which is your accumulated depreciation And then that is the wonderful number that you're going to subtract from the cost of 62.5, which gives you a book value of 20,883. Now when you come to year 2, you got 62.5 minus 41,667, because that is your accumulated depreciation, times 2 over 3. And you get 13,889. You take the 13,889 and you have to add it to the 41,667, and you get 55,556. Subtract that from 62.5, and then you get 62.5 minus 55556 times 2/3 equals 469. 4629, sorry. Add that. You get 60, 185. And then I think I'm done. Unless someone sees a problem.
I was just about to say that does not equal the residual value.
It does not. All right, so we do have a problem. Because if you look at what's going on here, number one, we don't equal residual value. Look at how much the double declining depreciates in the first year. Look at this year compared to straight line and compared to units of production. It's twice as much. All right. So straight line's whole purpose is to depreciate smoothly. It's kind of like weighted average. It's just a smooth depreciation that lasts over the life, which is why most people use it, because it just spreads depreciation evenly over the life of the asset. Units of production is used because it most evenly matches the use of your asset. So if you look at it, they rode that roller coaster 30,000 miles the first year, 50,000 the second, and 20,000 the last. So if you look at their depreciation, they took $18,000 the first year, $30,000 the second when they used it the most, and $12,000 the last. So units of production most evenly matches the use of your asset. So when you use it the most, you expense it the most, all right? So that's the most accurate. The whole purpose of double declining is to write it off your books as fast as possible. That's why it's called double, all right? You're getting it off there as quick as possible. So it more than doubles straight line. So in the first year, it takes twice as much. Then in the second year, it gets off as much as possible. In the third year, it's basically trying to get rid of it. So depending on how many years you have it, depends on how long it can write it off. But what happens with it then is sometimes it actually requires what's called a manual write-down. And I know this doesn't necessarily happen very often in accounting, but we actually will have to take a manual adjustment to this account, and we will have to subtract out $185 from here, and this will now become 4444. This will become 60,000, and this will become 2,500. Because we cannot depreciate below the residual value. And in some instances, you might have an asset that is 10 years and you're doing double declining. You might only get to the 8th year and you've depreciated it because you're depreciating as quick as possible. And the rationale behind double declining is, hey, let's use all the depreciation expense in the early years of an asset. And then in the later years, when you're not having depreciation expense, you'll start using repair expense. because one hopes that when you first have a car or first have a roller coaster or first have a new piece of equipment, you shouldn't be having repair expense. So let's use all the depreciation expense to bring down net income. And then in the later years, we'll have repair expense to offset it. It's kind of one of the rationales of double declining. Now, if we go to IFRS, there is no double declining. That goes away. So now the good news is for you guys is that I wouldn't have a manual write-off like that on a problem on the final, but you will see it in your homework. So you do got to understand how to do it. Any questions on that? Now I will upload this video so you will be able to see this as well as we're going to work a problem next. All right, I'm going to make this go away, but it will be saved. So then the next few slides, which I'm going to go through quickly because we just worked them, the next few slides do have these worked out, going through just a slightly different way of doing it, but they show you in kind of graph formal form how we worked through the exact problems. This one only does the book method, but you can see how they worked through that. And then they go through and work through each year, like I mentioned, to come up with the numbers. And then here's your double declining. I always add double because it was called double decline, but declining balance method. Here's your second year. And then here's your third year where they do the manual adjustment. And in the end, notice what happens. They all equal the same amount of the $60,000 in accumulated depreciation. So it doesn't matter in the end which one you use. It's just how do you get there. And it's really just a matter of bookkeeping and which ones they prefer. Companies do and can use fractions when it comes to partial years depreciation, but we won't do that in here. We'll be looking at full years. And then when it comes to depreciation for tax purposes, obviously some companies do look at things from a little different standpoint. And there are things that does have an economic effect from a tax depreciation standpoint. Now, when we go to get rid of some assets, there are some impairment issues. When you look at assets, we'll come back to this. Let's go ahead and work a problem